She was young, pure and naive, just looking for a chance. Hired to care for a mysterious millionaire, 40 years her senior. The moment she walked through that door, her life changed forever. If this story caught your interest, make sure to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from, then continue. The church bell echoed through the small town of Pine Ridge, just like every day at 6 in the morning, and Emily was already awake for an hour, organizing her grandmother's medications in perfect rows on the kitchen table. At 19, she knew by heart the routine that had governed her life forever. Black coffee and day-old bread for breakfast, Bible reading with her mother, caring for her grandmother who was wasting away in the back bedroom, and in her spare time when no one was looking, she secretly opened the nursing books she had managed to buy with money saved from selling homemade sweets in the town square. Mrs. Margaret, her mother, was a woman of few words and many prayers, who saw the world through a dark lens where anything that wasn't prayer, work, or sacrifice was sin. Emily grew up learning that dreaming big was pride, that questioning was rebellion, and that a proper young woman should be content caring for her family until some good man asked for her hand in marriage. But inside Emily's chest pulsed something different, a restlessness she couldn't name, a desire to fly that grew with each page of the medical books she devoured in secret. On that cold July morning, when fog still covered the mountains surrounding the town, Emily was helping her grandmother with breakfast when she heard knocks on the front door. Mrs. Margaret opened it with the suspicious expression she always used to receive strangers, but her face changed completely when she saw a well-dressed man in a dark suit and tie, holding a leather briefcase. "Are you Miss Emily Roberts' mother?" he asked, with the formal politeness of someone from the big city. Emily approached, her heart racing without understanding why. The man introduced himself as a lawyer, representing a client who preferred to keep his identity confidential for now. He talked about a job offer, a unique opportunity for a young woman with nursing knowledge. The salary he mentioned made Mrs. Margaret hold onto the door to keep from stumbling. It was more than they earned in 2 years selling sweets and doing sewing work. "But it's night work, ma'am. Taking care of a gentleman who has health problems during the night hours. The house is 2 hours from here in the mountains. Your daughter would have to live there during the week, returning only on weekends," explained the lawyer, observing the reaction of the two women. Emily felt the world spin. For the first time in her life, a door was opening for her, a chance to use what she had learned from books, to have financial independence, to know a world beyond the narrow streets of Pine Ridge. But at the same time, the idea of leaving her mother and grandmother, of working for a stranger in an unknown house, filled her with a fear that mixed terror and excitement in a way she had never experienced. "And who is this gentleman?" asked Mrs. Margaret, her voice heavy with suspicion. "Nathan Blackwood," answered the lawyer, and Emily noticed how he slightly lowered his voice when pronouncing the name. "He's a businessman, very private. The hiring requires total discretion. Your daughter would sign a rather strict confidentiality agreement." The name meant nothing to Emily, but she saw her mother's expression change. Mrs. Margaret knew the stories that circulated about the rich man who lived in an isolated mansion in the mountains, stories that mixed truth and legend, admiration and fear. They said he had become wealthy overnight, that his wife had died mysteriously, that he hadn't received visitors or come down to town in years. "I need an answer by tomorrow," said the lawyer, leaving a card on the table. "If you accept, she would start on Monday. There will be a car to pick her up." After he left, mother and daughter remained silent for long minutes, each lost in her own thoughts. Emily looked out the window to the distant mountains, where the mysterious man who might forever change her life was hiding. Fear and curiosity fought within her, but something stronger than both was beginning to be born, the first spark of a freedom she had always desired but never dared imagine within reach. That night, Emily could barely sleep, imagining what it would be like to care for a stranger during the quietest hours of the night, in the shadows of a house that the rest of the world seemed to fear and respect in equal measure. The decision came at dawn, when Emily woke up and found her grandmother awake, looking out the window with those tired eyes that seemed to see beyond what everyone else saw. "Go, child," whispered the old lady, holding her granddaughter's hand with a strength that surprised Emily. Sometimes destiny knocks on our door disguised as fear. You were born for something greater than this town. Mrs. Margaret took longer to convince, but when Emily promised to send money every month and return every weekend, she yielded with a heavy heart. On Monday, precisely at 7 in the morning, an elegant black car stopped in front of the humble house. The driver, a middle-aged man with a face marked by time, took Emily's only suitcase and opened the back door without saying a word. The journey through the mountains was like entering another world. The road wound between giant pine trees and thick fog, climbing higher and higher, further and further from civilization. Emily pressed her face against the window, watching the landscape change from rural to wild, until finally, after almost 2 hours, iron gates appeared between the trees. The Blackwood mansion was an imposing structure of stone and dark wood, 3 stories high with enormous windows that looked like empty eyes observing anyone who approached. Perfectly maintained gardens contrasted with the somber atmosphere of the place, and Emily felt a shiver run down her spine when the car stopped in front of the main entrance. A woman of about 50, dressed in black with a severely tied bun, received her at the door. "I'm Martha, the housekeeper. Mr. Blackwood is waiting for you in the library." Her voice was cold but not hostile, just extremely professional. Emily was led through silent corridors, decorated with old paintings and furniture, that seemed worth more than everything she had ever seen in her life. The smell of polished wood and old books permeated the air, creating an atmosphere that oscillated between elegant and oppressive. The library was an enormous room, with floor-to-ceiling shelves full of books in various languages. A fireplace crackled softly in the corner, and it was beside it that Emily saw him for the first time. Nathan Blackwood was seated in a dark leather armchair, reading a book that he closed as soon as she entered. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, perfectly combed graying hair, and eyes of such an intense blue that they seemed capable of piercing the soul of whoever looked at them. His face had the marks of maturity, but maintained a masculine and imposing beauty that made Emily immediately lower her eyes. "Miss Emily," he said, standing up. His voice was deep, with a natural tone of command that made it clear who dominated that space. "I hope the journey was comfortable." "Yes, sir, thank you," Emily managed to respond, her hands trembling slightly. Nathan walked toward her, and Emily noticed that he limped slightly on his left leg. When he stopped before her, he was close, enough for her to smell the masculine cologne he wore, a fragrance that mixed woody notes with something wilder, more dangerous. "I imagine you have questions about the job," he said, gesturing for her to sit in a nearby chair. "My heart condition requires constant monitoring during the night. Crises can happen at any moment. You'll be responsible for checking my vital signs every 2 hours, administering medications as needed, and waking me if you notice any irregularities." Emily nodded, trying to concentrate on the words, and not on how his presence seemed to fill the entire room. There was something magnetic about this man, an energy that attracted and intimidated her at the same time. "There are rules that need to be followed rigorously," continued Nathan, his eyes fixed on hers. "You have free access to the first floor during the night, including the kitchen, living room, and my bedroom. The second floor is strictly forbidden, as is the basement. It's for your own safety." "I understand, sir," Emily murmured, but a dangerous curiosity was already growing inside her. "During the day you can rest, use the library, walk in the gardens. Martha will show you your quarters. Your shift begins at 10 at night and ends at 6 in the morning." He stepped closer, and Emily had to make a conscious effort not to back away. His proximity awakened sensations she didn't even know existed, a strange warmth that rose from her chest to her cheeks. "One last thing," said Nathan, his voice lower now, almost intimate. "Everything that happens in this house, everything you see or hear, stays here. This is an agreement based on mutual trust. I hope we can work well together." When he extended his hand to greet her, Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second before accepting it. The touch was electric, as if a current passed between them, and she saw something change in his eyes too, an intensity that wasn't there seconds before. That first night, when Emily took her post in a chair beside his bed, observing Nathan's regular breathing as he slept, she didn't imagine that she had just taken the first step on a journey that would transform her forever. The first nights were an exercise in self-control that Emily never imagined she would need to face. Sitting in the dim light of Nathan's room, she tried to concentrate on the numbers on the heart monitor, the regularity of his breathing, the medication schedule. But it was impossible to ignore the magnetic presence of the man sleeping a few meters from her. The master bedroom of the mansion was an extension of Nathan's personality, elegant masculine, with dark tones that created an intimate atmosphere. A king-sized bed dominated the center of the room, flanked by two leather armchairs where Emily spent her hours of vigil. From the large window, there was an impressive view of the mountains, which during the night seemed like silent guardians of all the secrets of that house. Nathan always slept on the right side of the bed, as if the left was reserved for a presence that was no longer there. Sometimes he murmured incomprehensible words, and Emily found herself paying attention, trying to decipher the secrets he carried, even in his dreams. On one of these nights, she heard him whisper "Rebecca," with an anguish that made her heart tighten in a strange way, almost like jealousy. During the day, Emily timidly explored the permitted spaces of the mansion. The library became her favorite refuge, a universe of knowledge that made her eyes shine like those of a child in a candy store. Nathan had noticed her interest in books and, on a rainy afternoon, found her reading a treatise on cardiology with a concentration that surprised him. "Interesting choice," he said, entering the library with that presence that always made the air seem denser. "Most people prefer romance or fiction." Emily quickly closed the book, her cheeks flushing. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't." "On the contrary, use it freely. Knowledge is never too much, especially in your field." Nathan approached the shelf, taking out another volume. "This one has a more practical approach to arrhythmias. It might be useful for better understanding my condition." When he handed her the book, their fingers briefly touched, and again Emily felt that electric current that left her breathless. Nathan seemed to feel it too, because he hesitated before releasing the book, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Emily," he said, his voice lower than normal, "have you always been interested in medicine?" It was the first personal conversation they had, and Emily found herself telling him about the hidden books, about her dream of one day going to college, about how she grew up taking care of her sick grandmother. Nathan listened to her with an attention she had never received from anyone, and for the first time in her life, Emily felt seen, truly understood. "Why did you never try to go to college?" he asked. "We didn't have the money, and my mother, she believes that a woman should take care of the house, the family. Dreaming big is a sin for her." Emily lowered her eyes, surprised by her own sincerity. "And for you, is it also a sin?" The question caught Emily by surprise. She raised her eyes and found Nathan studying her face, as if he wanted to memorize every detail. I don't know anymore what is sin and what is necessity." Something changed between them in that moment. An invisible barrier began to crack, letting escape sparks of something dangerous and inevitable. The following nights became different. Nathan began to wake up more often, asking for water, asking questions about the medications, creating excuses for conversations that extended into the night. Emily realized that he didn't always really need something, but she couldn't bring herself to care. Those nocturnal conversations were like an addiction, dangerous but irresistible. One night, while checking his blood pressure, Emily noticed how Nathan's hand trembled slightly. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked, concerned. "It's the new medication. Sometimes it causes tremors." But there was something in his voice that wasn't convincing. Emily moved closer, lightly touching his forehead to check for fever. The touch was gentle, professional, but when their eyes met, the air between them seemed to electrify. Nathan raised, his hand touching her face with a delicacy that contrasted with all his apparent hardness. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, but he didn't remove his hand. "Why?" Emily whispered back, her heart beating so hard that she was sure he could hear it. Nathan didn't answer. Instead, he abruptly withdrew his hand and turned to the other side of the bed. "You'd better rest. There will be no more calls tonight." Emily. Left the room confused and agitated, her heart still racing from his touch. Walking through the silent corridors of the mansion, she tried to understand what was happening to her. She had never felt anything like this mixture of desire and fear, of attraction and guilt. It was when she passed by the staircase leading to the forbidden second floor that she heard it for the first time. A dull noise, as if something heavy had fallen on the floor above. Emily stopped, paying attention, but silence returned to reign in the mansion. Still, a dangerous curiosity began to grow inside her. What was Nathan hiding up there, and why was he so certain it was for her own safety? That night, Emily could barely sleep, divided between the desire to understand the man who had hired her and the fear of discovering truths that might be better ignored. The first week in the mansion passed like a confused dream, where Emily floated between the reality of work and the unreality of the sensations that Nathan awakened in her. When Friday finally arrived and she could return home, she descended from the mountain with her head full of questions and her heart full of an agitation she couldn't name. In Pine Ridge, everything seemed smaller, tighter, as if she had grown in just a few days. Her mother noticed the change immediately. There was something different in Emily's gaze, a new restlessness that made her even more beautiful and at the same time more distant. "What is he like?" asked Mrs. Margaret while they prepared dinner. Emily hesitated, absently stirring the beans in the pot. How to explain Nathan? How to describe a man who seemed to contain entire storms inside his blue eyes? He's serious, polite, treats the staff well. And the house? Big, full of books. It's too quiet sometimes. Emily didn't mention the strange noises from the second floor, nor the constant sensation that the mansion kept secrets in every corner. The weekend passed too quickly, and when Monday arrived, Emily realized she was anxious to return, not just for work, but for something more dangerous, for the possibility of seeing Nathan again, of feeling again that electricity in the air that made her blood run hotter in her veins. The second week brought subtle but significant changes. Nathan began to appear more often during the day, always with plausible excuses, checking if she was comfortable, asking about her adaptation, offering new books. But Emily noticed that he observed her when he thought she wasn't looking, his eyes following her every movement through the library or the gardens. It was on a Thursday afternoon, while Emily was reading on the porch, that she met Jack, the property's gardener. He was a man of about 60, with hands marked by work and eyes that seemed to have seen more than they should. He was pruning the rose bushes when he approached her, pretending to organize his tools. "Miss is adapting well?" he asked, but there was something in his tone that wasn't just politeness. "Yes, thank you, it's a very beautiful place." Jack looked around as if making sure there was no one nearby. "Beautiful, yes, but not everything that's beautiful is safe, is it?" Emily frowned, closing her book. "What do you mean?" "Nothing much, miss. It's just that, well, this house has seen a lot. A lot of sadness. Sometimes it's better not to mess with wounds that haven't healed yet." Jack avoided her gaze, concentrating on the plants. "Mr. Nathan is a good man, but he carries many ghosts, and ghosts sometimes don't like it when someone new appears." Before Emily could ask anything else, Jack moved away, leaving her alone, with a shiver of unease crawling up her spine. That night, the shift started differently. Nathan was more agitated than normal, walking around the room like a caged animal. There was a tension in the air, something that Emily couldn't identify, but that kept her alert. "Are you feeling something?" she asked, checking the equipment. "It's nothing physical," replied Nathan, stopping in front of the window that overlooked the gardens. "Today marks 6 years." Emily didn't need to ask of what. There was a raw pain in his voice that spoke for itself. 6 years since his wife's death. She approached slowly, as if he were a wounded animal that might flee at the slightest sudden movement. "Do you want to talk about it?" Nathan let out a bitter laugh. "Talk about what? About how I was a terrible husband, about how I failed the one person I should have protected." He turned to her, and Emily saw unshed tears shining in his eyes. "Rebecca was delicate, fragile. I was too hard on her, too demanding. I thought I was helping her become stronger, but I only managed to break her even more. Emily felt her heart tighten. Without thinking much, she extended her hand and touched his arm. "You can't blame yourself forever." "Yes, I can." Nathan looked at her hand on his arm but didn't move away. "Especially when I know she was pregnant when she died, pregnant and desperate, running away from me as if I were a monster." The silence that followed was charged with pain and something more, a dangerous intimacy that grew between them with each confession, each moment of shared vulnerability. "Nathan," Emily whispered, and it was the first time she said his name. The sound seemed to stir something deep within him, because his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her tremble. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated the words from the previous night, but this time his voice sounded more like desperation than an order. "Why not?" "Because you're young, pure, have your whole life ahead of you, and I'm a broken man with ghosts. That won't leave me in peace." Nathan moved closer to her, raising his hand to touch her face. "Because when I look at you, I forget all the reasons why I should keep my distance." Emily closed her eyes as she felt his touch, the warmth of his palm against her cheek. "And what if I don't want you to keep your distance?" The question came out before she could censor herself, charged with a courage she didn't know she possessed. When she opened her eyes, she found Nathan looking at her, as if she were both a miracle and a curse at the same time. "Emily," he began, but was interrupted by the sharp sound of the heart monitor. His blood pressure had spiked. The moment broke like glass. Emily immediately assumed her professional role, making him sit down, checking his vital signs, administering the necessary medication. But even as she cared for him, she felt that something fundamental had changed between them that night. When everything calmed down and Nathan finally fell asleep, Emily remained awake, looking out the window at the dark mountains. Deep in her heart, she knew she had already crossed a line from which there would be no return. The third week brought changes that Emily didn't expect. Nathan became more present, more attentive, but also more cautious, as if he were fighting against himself with every look they exchanged, every word spoken. During the day, she would find him in the library or in the gardens, always with some excuse to start a conversation that invariably extended for hours. It was a dangerous dance that they both knew they were dancing. He lent her increasingly personal books, works of poetry and philosophy with notes in the margins, intimate thoughts written in his elegant handwriting. She devoured them as if they were love letters, trying to decipher the complex man who hid behind the words. "Have you ever thought about continuing your studies?" asked Nathan one afternoon as they walked through the gardens. Autumn painted the trees gold and red, creating a scene that seemed out of a fairy tale. "I've always thought about it, but it never seemed possible," replied Emily, stopping to admire a bed of chrysanthemums. "My family needs me, and we don't have the resources for—" "What if there was a way?" Nathan gently interrupted her. "Medical school isn't so far from here. It would be possible to study during the day and maintain the night work." Emily looked at him in surprise. "You would do that? Help me study?" "I would do anything to see you achieving your dreams," he replied, and the sincerity in his voice made her heart race. That night, Emily was more agitated than usual. Nathan's offer had affected her in a way she couldn't fully process. Was it generosity, romantic interest, or was there something more behind that gesture? It was during one of her routine checks, around 2 in the morning, that everything changed. Nathan was sleeping deeply when Emily heard that noise coming from the second floor again. This time, however, it sounded different, like footsteps, as if someone was walking up there. Emily's heart accelerated. There was no one else in the house besides her, Nathan, Martha, and Jack, and both the housekeeper and the gardener lived in town. Nathan continued sleeping, his breathing regular. So who or what was on the floor above? Unable to contain the curiosity that had been gnawing at her for weeks, Emily silently left the room. The corridor was immersed in shadows, illuminated only by the weak light coming from the windows. The staircase to the second floor rose before her like a forbidden invitation. She climbed slowly, each step creaking slightly under her feet. The corridor of the second floor was narrower than the one below, with several closed doors, all locked, except one at the end of the corridor, which was ajar. Emily approached with her heart in her throat. Through the gap she could see a room that had clearly belonged to a woman. It was like entering a sanctuary, dresses still hanging. In the wardrobe, perfumes on the dressing tables, photographs scattered over the surfaces, and in the center of it all, a bed with rumpled sheets, as if someone had just risen from it. But what really caught her attention was a small bedside table, where an open diary showed pages covered in a nervous feminine handwriting. Emily approached, knowing she was violating something sacred but unable to resist. The first pages spoke of happiness, of a honeymoon in Paris, of plans for the future. But as she advanced in the reading, the tone changed drastically. Rebecca described growing paranoia, the feeling of being watched, suspicions that Nathan was cheating on her. "He has changed since we returned from the trip. There's something in his eyes, something cold, calculating. Sometimes I'm afraid of him." Emily turned more pages, finding increasingly desperate entries. "I found condoms in his drawer. We haven't used them in months. He says he wants children. What would they be for then?" And further on, "I overheard a phone conversation. He was talking to someone about solving the problem. Could I be the problem?" The last entry, dated just 3 days before Rebecca's death, made Emily's blood run cold. "I'm pregnant. I took the test today, but I can't tell Nathan, not yet. I'm afraid of what he'll do. I'm afraid that he won't want this child, that he won't want me anymore." Found something interesting? Emily turned around so quickly that she almost dropped the diary. Nathan was standing in the doorway, wearing only pajama pants, his bare chest revealing a scar that cut diagonally across his heart. But it was his expression that terrified her. Cold, controlled, dangerous. I heard a noise and—" Emily stammered, trying to explain the inexplicable, "and decided to investigate the forbidden floor." Nathan entered the room, closing the door behind him. "Despite all the warnings, despite the agreement we signed—" "Nathan, I can explain." "Can you?" He approached slowly, like a predator circling his prey. "Can you explain why you're snooping into the life of my dead wife? Why you're violating her privacy? Our privacy?" Emily backed up until her back met the wall. "I didn't mean to. I just heard the noise and—" "What noise?" Nathan stopped right in front of her, his blue eyes shining with an intensity that terrified her. "There's no one here but the two of us." "But I heard footsteps." "I swear that—" "You heard what you wanted to hear, saw what you wanted to see." Nathan placed his hands on the wall, one on each side of her head, trapping her. Just like Rebecca, she also started to hear things, to see things that didn't exist. Fear and attraction mixed confusingly in Emily's chest. So close she could feel the heat emanating from his body, the masculine scent that made her lose her reason. But there was something dangerous in those eyes, something that made her question if she really knew the man she was falling in love with. "Please," she whispered, "let me explain." Nathan studied her face for long seconds, and something changed in his expression. The coldness gave way to something more complex, more painful. "There's nothing to explain, Emily. You did what any person would do, questioned, investigated, looked for the truth." He moved away from her, running his hands through his hair. "Maybe it's better that you know who I really am before it's too late." The silence that followed was charged with a tension that seemed about to explode. Emily knew she had reached a point of no return, a moment that would define not only her work in that house, but her entire life. Nathan walked to the window of the bedroom, his back turned to Emily, his shoulders tense as if carrying the weight of the world. The silence stretched for minutes that seemed like hours, broken only by the wind beating against the glass. "Rebecca had bipolar disorder," he finally said, his voice low and heavy with pain. "We discovered it after the marriage. During the first few months she managed to control it with medication, therapy, but the pregnancy changed everything." Emily remained motionless against the wall, barely daring to breathe. The hormones disrupted everything. She began to have paranoid episodes, thought I had other women, that I was conspiring against her, that I wanted to steal the baby. Nathan turned slowly, his eyes red with unshed tears. The condoms she found? They were from before the marriage, forgotten in a drawer. The phone conversations? With doctors trying to find a treatment that wouldn't harm the child. Emily felt her heart tighten. And you never managed to explain it to her? I tried. God knows how I tried. Nathan let out a bitter laugh. But when paranoia takes over, there's no logic that works. She saw me as an enemy, not as a husband. In the last weeks, she could barely stay in the same room with me. What happened that night? Nathan closed his eyes, as if reliving the most painful moment of his life. She had a violent episode. She started screaming that I wanted to kill her, that I had never loved her or the baby. She ran to the balcony on the second floor. His voice faltered. I tried to hold her, I swear I tried, but she was so desperate, so convinced that I was a threat. She slipped from my hands. Emily approached slowly, seeing the raw pain etched on his face. It was an accident. It was. But that doesn't change the fact that I failed her, that I couldn't save her when she needed me most. Nathan looked at Emily with an intensity that made her tremble. And now you know why I can't get close to you, why it's dangerous for any woman to be near me. That's absurd, Emily said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. You're not responsible for her illness. No? Nathan laughed without humor. Then why are you here, Emily? Why does a 19-year-old girl accept a job with a man everyone avoids? Why do you stay when any sensible person would run away? The question caught Emily off guard. Why was she really there? The money had been the initial motivation, but now there was something much more dangerous and irresistible. Because I see who you really are, she finally said. I see a man who carries guilt he shouldn't carry, who sacrifices himself trying to protect others from his own pain. Nathan studied her for long seconds. You don't know me, Emily. Then let me know you. The tension between them was almost palpable. Nathan took a step toward her, then another until he was close enough to touch. If I let you truly know me, there will be no going back. Do you understand that? Emily nodded, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. I understand. When Nathan finally touched her, it was with a gentleness that contrasted with all the intensity of the moment. His hands framed her face, his thumbs caressing her cheeks while his eyes studied every detail of her expression. You're trembling, he murmured. I am, Emily admitted, without trying to hide it. From fear? Emily thought about the question, analyzing the sensations running through her body. No, from anticipation. It was all Nathan needed to hear. When he kissed her, it was as if the world stopped. The kiss began gentle, almost hesitant, but quickly transformed into something more urgent, more desperate. Emily had never been kissed like this, had never felt this fire running through her veins, this need that seemed to consume everything around her. When they separated, both were breathless. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. This is madness, he whispered. Maybe, Emily agreed, but I don't care. They went down together to Nathan's bedroom. The atmosphere between them changed forever. There was no more employer-employee formality, nor the caution of the first days. There was something new, intense, that promised as much pleasure as pain. But the next morning, when Emily woke up in the armchair, where she always slept during the day, she found a letter on the bedside table. In Nathan's elegant handwriting, it said only, "Forgive me for everything that is to come." The phrase chilled her to the bone. What secrets was Nathan still hiding? And why did she have the feeling that the storm was just beginning? Her answer came that very afternoon, when a young man of approximately 30 appeared at the mansion, unannounced. Tall, handsome, with a confident smile that didn't reach his eyes, he introduced himself as Michael Blackwood, Nathan's nephew. "So you're the famous nurse," he said, studying Emily in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. "Uncle Nathan has talked a lot about you." "He has?" Emily asked, confused. "Oh yes, in fact that's what I've come to talk about." Michael's smile became predatory, about how an unknown young woman managed in such a short time to become so important to a man who has avoided any kind of relationship for 6 years. Emily felt a shiver of apprehension. There was something in the way Michael looked at her, something that suggested he knew much more than he should about what was happening between her and Nathan. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. "You don't?" Michael laughed. "What a pity, because I know exactly what I'm talking about, and more importantly, I know exactly what to do with this information." Michael Blackwood was the type of man that Emily had learned to instinctively distrust. Calculated, charm, a smile that didn't reach the eyes, and a presence that suggested danger disguised as courtesy. He installed himself in the mansion as if it were his home, claiming concern for his uncle's health, but Emily noticed that his eyes were always analyzing, cataloguing, looking for weaknesses. "You know, Emily," he said on the second day of his visit, finding her alone in the library, "I've always wondered what kind of woman would capture my uncle's attention. He's a complex man, with a complicated history." Emily closed the book she was reading, keeping her expression neutral. "I'm just his nurse." "Just?" Michael laughed, approaching the shelf where she was. "What modesty! A nurse who manages to make my uncle smile for the first time in 6 years? Who makes him consider renovating his deceased wife's room? That's much more than just nursing." Emily's heart raced. Nathan was thinking about renovating Rebecca's room. He hadn't mentioned anything about that. "I see he didn't tell you," Michael continued, observing her expression with satisfaction. "Well, yesterday he called a decorator, said he wanted to transform that space into something new. Interesting. Coincidence, don't you think?" Emily stood up, trying to leave the library, but Michael subtly blocked her path. "You don't need to run away, dear. I'm just trying to protect you." His voice was loaded with false concern. "You seem like an intelligent young woman, so I'll be direct. My uncle is very rich, very lonely, and you're a pretty girl from a humble family. People will talk, Emily. They already are." "What people?" Michael took his phone from his pocket, showing her a photo that made her turn pale. It was an image of her and Nathan in the garden, apparently taken with a telephoto lens, where they seemed closer than they really were at the moment. The local press is already interested in the story. "Reclusive millionaire finds love with a young nurse." Very romantic, don't you think? Michael put the phone away, smiling. "Of course, there are also less romantic versions. Young opportunist seduces vulnerable widower. It depends on how the story is told." Emily felt nausea rising in her throat. "What do you want?" "Me? Nothing much. Just for you to understand your position. My uncle has been emotionally fragile since his wife's death. It's easy to confuse gratitude with love, compassion with passion. It would be terrible if he made a hasty decision that he would later regret. And you're concerned about his well-being? Naturally, we're family." Michael's smile became colder, and family protects family from all threats. That night, Emily was tense and distracted during her shift. Nathan immediately noticed that something was wrong. "You've barely spoken to me today," he said, after a routine check. "Did Michael say something?" Emily hesitated. How could she tell Nathan about his nephew's implicit threats without sounding paranoid? How could she explain the fear growing in her chest? "He showed me a photo," she finally said, "of us in the garden, said the press is interested in the story." Nathan's face immediately darkened. That son of a bitch. "Nathan?" "No." He got up from the bed, starting to pace around the room. "I should have known. Michael has always been ambitious, always coveted my inheritance, and now that I've finally found something, someone who makes me want to live again, he shows up to destroy everything." Emily approached him, touching his arm. "Can he really cause problems?" Nathan stopped, looking at her with a mixture of love and desperation. "He can cause more problems than you can imagine. Michael has connections, influence. If he wants to turn our story into a scandal, he will. And if he succeeds, then you'll be destroyed along with me. Your reputation, your future, everything." Nathan held her face between his hands. "Emily, maybe he's right. Maybe it's better for you to leave here before it's too late." "No." The response came instantly, firmly. I won't let him win. I won't leave you alone again." But the next day, Emily discovered that she might not have a choice. When she arrived home for the weekend, she found her mother visibly disturbed, and the cause of her agitation was sitting in the living room. Greg, her ex-boyfriend. Greg was 2 years older than Emily, the son of a traditional family in town, and had been her first and only relationship before Nathan. The relationship had ended 2 years before, when he began to show possessive and controlling behaviors that frightened her. Seeing him there, in her house, uninvited, brought back all the bad feelings. "Emily!" He stood up when she entered, his broad smile not disguising the obsessive gleam in his eyes. "I've missed you so much. You're more beautiful than ever. What are you doing here, Greg?" "I've come to save you, of course." He approached, ignoring her obvious discomfort. "I heard about your situation up at the mansion, working alone with that strange man. Emily, it's not right, it's not safe." Mrs. Margaret, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Greg told us some concerning things, daughter, about this man who hired you." "What things?" Emily asked, although she already suspected the answer. Greg took out his phone, showing the same photo that Michael had shown. "This is circulating on the internet, Emily. Everyone is commenting. They say you're getting involved with a murderer." "He's not a murderer." "How can you be sure?" Greg moved closer, trying to touch her face. "Emily, you've always been too naive. This man already killed one wife. Do you want to be the next?" The accusation was like a punch to the stomach. Emily looked at her mother, seeing the genuine concern in her eyes, and felt her world beginning to crumble. How could she explain that Nathan wasn't a murderer? How could she make them understand that she was in love with a man who carried ghosts, but not crimes? "Come back home, Emily," Greg said, taking advantage of her silence. "Abandon this dangerous job. Marry me. Let's have a normal, safe life, away from all this madness." Emily looked at him, then at her mother, feeling the weight of their expectations and fear. But when she closed her eyes, she saw only Nathan, his gentle hands, his eyes full of pain and love, the way he made her feel alive for the first time in her life. "No," she finally said, "I'm not abandoning anything, and I'm certainly not going to marry you." Greg's expression changed instantly, the gentle mask falling to reveal something darker underneath. "So you choose a murderer over me? You choose to destroy your life for a man who will only use you and then discard you?" "I choose to be free to love whoever I want," Emily responded, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. But as she spoke, she knew the battle was just beginning. Michael on one side, Greg on the other, and she in the center of a storm that threatened to destroy everything she was beginning to build with Nathan. Emily returned to the mansion on Monday with a heavy heart and a fierce determination. The conversation with Greg and her mother had left scars, but it had also crystallized something inside her. No matter how many people tried to separate her from Nathan, she would fight for what she felt. Nathan was waiting for her in the library, and one look was enough for him to realize that something had happened during the weekend. She told him everything. Greg, the veiled threats, the pressure from the family, the photos circulating online. As she spoke, she saw his face closing more and more, a storm forming in his blue eyes. "This has to stop," he said when she finished. "I won't let them destroy you because of me." "Nathan, we talked about this. We talked before knowing that Michael was plotting behind our backs, before knowing that your family is suffering." Nathan stood up, walking to the window. "Maybe it's time to confront him directly." The confrontation happened that same afternoon. Michael was in the living room drinking whiskey as if he owned the house when Nathan entered with Emily beside him. "We need to talk," said Nathan, his voice icy. "Of course, Uncle." "About what?" Michael smiled, but there was tension in his shoulders. "About your attempts to blackmail Emily, about the photos you're spreading, about your campaign to destroy something that is none of your business." Michael set down his glass slowly, his smile transforming into something more dangerous. "Destroy? I would say I'm trying to save the family's reputation and protect you from making a decision you'll regret. The only thing I regret is having tolerated your presence in my house." "Your house?" Michael stood up, the mask finally falling. "This house will be mine when you die, Nathan. And by the way your heart is going, that shouldn't take long." The silence that followed was filled with venom. Emily saw Nathan turn pale, his hand instinctively going to his chest. "What do you mean by that?" asked Nathan, his voice dangerously low. "You think I don't know? That I don't have contacts at the hospital?" Michael laughed. "I know about the new tests, about how your condition has deteriorated. I know the doctors gave you 2 years at most." Emily felt the world spin. Nathan hadn't told her anything about new tests, about a worsening condition. She looked at him and saw the confirmation in the expression of pain he was trying to hide. "That's precisely why you should be grateful," continued Michael, "that I'm trying to prevent you from ruining the last years of your life with a romantic illusion. This girl is young, has her whole life ahead of her. Are you really going to condemn her to be a widow before 25? "Enough," said Nathan, but his voice came out weak. "And you, Emily," Michael turned to her, "do you really want to waste your youth taking care of a dying man? Because that's what he is. A man marked for death." Emily felt tears burning in her eyes, but not from sadness, from anger. "You're despicable. I'm realistic, and I'm going to make a proposal to both of you." Michael sat back down, as if he were negotiating a contract. "Emily ends the contract and leaves. Publicly, let's say she was fired for incompetence. In exchange, I guarantee that the photos disappear from the internet and that no sordid story reaches the press." "And if we refuse?" Nathan asked. "Then Emily will discover what it's like to be pursued by the media 24 hours a day. Her family will be harassed. Her ex-boyfriend will gain a lot of public support in the campaign to save her. And when you die, Nathan, she won't inherit anything. I'll make sure of that." The threat hung in the air, like a death sentence. Emily looked at Nathan and saw defeat beginning to settle in his eyes. She couldn't let that happen. "No," she said, surprising both men. "Emily," Nathan began. "No," she repeated more firmly. "I won't let you win," she said to Michael. "And I won't let you give up," she said to Nathan. Michael laughed. "You don't have a choice. Either you accept my proposal, or I destroy both of you." "Then destroy us," Emily said, walking to Nathan and taking his hand, "because I won't abandon the man I love because of your threats." It was the first time she had said those words out loud. Nathan looked at her with an expression of astonishment and love, so intense that for a moment Michael was forgotten. "Emily," Nathan whispered, "you don't understand what you're saying." "I understand. Perfectly." She turned to Michael. "Do what you want. Publish your photos, spread your stories. But I won't let you destroy what we've built." Michael's expression became truly dangerous. "Very well. Since you insist on doing this the hard way, I'll show you how things really work in the real world." He left the room, and Emily knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. War had been declared. That night, while caring for Nathan, she noticed how he was paler, how his breathing was more labored. The revelation about his condition terrified her, but also made her more determined. If their time was limited, she wasn't going to waste a second on fear or regrets. "Why didn't you tell me about the tests?" she asked during one of the routine checks. Nathan closed his eyes. "Because I didn't want you to stay with me out of pity." "And now?" "Now I know Michael was right. I can't ask you to waste your life with a man who's dying." Emily stopped what she was doing, forcing him to look at her. "Nathan Blackwood, if you try to push me away now after everything we've been through, after I declared my love for you in front of that worm of a nephew of yours, I swear I'll make your life a living hell for the years we have left." For the first time in days, Nathan smiled, a genuine smile full of love and admiration. "You're incredible." "I'm in love. It's different." Emily leaned in, kissing him gently. "And I won't let either Michael or death separate us." But as they kissed, neither of them imagined that Michael was already putting his plan into action. A plan that would involve not just the destruction of their reputation, but something much more sinister and dangerous. The week that followed was a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty. True to his word, Michael unleashed a media storm that seemed to engulf everything in its path. Local newspapers published thinly veiled stories about a May-December romance with dark undertones, and speculation about Nathan's past became the favorite topic at every coffee shop in Pine Ridge. Emily's family suffered the brunt of the assault. Reporters camped outside their modest home, shouting questions about their daughter's relationship with the mountain recluse. Mrs. Margaret, initially shaken by the attention, gradually found an unexpected strength. When a particularly aggressive reporter suggested that her daughter was a gold digger, the normally reserved woman stood on her porch and delivered a scathing rebuke that left the man speechless. "My daughter has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body," she declared, her voice carrying across the street where other reporters gathered. "She has cared for the sick her entire life, starting with her own grandmother. If she's found someone who appreciates her goodness, then I stand with her. No matter what vultures like you might say." Meanwhile, at the mansion, Nathan's health seemed to deteriorate rapidly. The stress of the situation exacerbated his heart condition, leading to more frequent episodes of arrhythmia. Emily stayed by his side, fiercely protective, administering medication and monitoring his vitals with professional precision and personal devotion. "You should go," Nathan said one night, after a particularly severe episode that left him weak and breathless. "This is killing you too, I can see it in your eyes." Emily shook her head, adjusting his pillows with gentle hands. "What's killing me is watching you suffer. And if you mention me leaving one more time, I'll start playing heavy metal music during your rest periods." The threat, absurd as it was, made Nathan smile. Even in the darkest moments, Emily had a way of bringing light into his life, a stubborn optimism that refused to be extinguished. But their brief moment of peace was shattered the next morning. When Martha burst into the bedroom, her normally composed demeanor replaced by undisguised panic. "Mr. Blackwood, there are police officers downstairs. They're asking for you. And Miss Emily." Emily and Nathan exchanged a look of confusion that quickly turned to understanding. This had to be Michael's doing. Downstairs, two officers waited in the living room, their expressions somber. One of them, a stern-faced woman with graying hair, stepped forward. "Mr. Nathan Blackwood, I'm Detective Wilson. We need to ask you some questions regarding allegations that have been brought to our attention." "What allegations?" Nathan asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "We've received a report suggesting that your wife's death 6 years ago may not have been accidental." Detective Wilson's eyes moved to Emily. "And that you, Miss Roberts, may have knowledge pertinent to this case." Emily felt the room tilt. "That's absurd. I didn't even know Nathan 6 years ago." "Nevertheless," the detective continued, unmoved by her protest, "we have a warrant to search the premises, particularly the second floor of the mansion." Nathan sat down heavily, his face ashen. "This is Michael's work, isn't it?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose who filed the report, sir, but I suggest you both cooperate fully." The search lasted hours, with officers combing through Rebecca's preserved room, taking photographs, bagging items. Emily stayed close to Nathan, watching his vitals with growing concern as his heart monitor showed increasingly erratic patterns. When the police finally left, promising to return with more questions, Nathan seemed to collapse into himself. He looked older, diminished, as if the weight of the past had physically crushed him. "He's going to win," Nathan whispered, staring at the fireplace where no fire burned despite the chill in the air. "Michael's always been ruthless, but I never thought he'd go this far." Emily knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "Nathan, look at me." She waited until his blue eyes, dulled with despair, met hers. "We're not going to let him win. But you need to tell me everything. Every detail about Rebecca, about that night. If we're going to fight this, I need to know exactly what we're fighting against." And so, in the fading light of day, Nathan finally shared the full story of his marriage to Rebecca, how they had met at a charity gala, fallen in love quickly, married within months. How the first signs of her mental illness had appeared on their honeymoon, when she became convinced that the hotel staff was spying on them, the slow descent into paranoia, the diagnosis of bipolar disorder with psychotic features, the desperate search for treatments that wouldn't harm their unborn child. The night she died, Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper, she had stopped taking her medication. She was convinced it was poisoning the baby. I found her in a terrible state, screaming about voices telling her that I was planning to lock her away forever. He paused, closing his eyes against the memory. I tried to calm her, to tell her I only wanted to help, but she ran up to the second floor to her room. When I followed, she was out on the balcony, threatening to jump if I came any closer. I tried to reason with her, took a step forward and she backed away. The railing was old, weakened by weather. His voice broke. It gave way. I lunged to grab her, caught her hand for just a moment, but she slipped away. Emily held him as he wept, years of pent-up grief finally finding release. When his tears subsided, she asked the question that had been forming in her mind. Were there witnesses? Anyone who saw what happened? Nathan shook his head. Just the housekeeper at the time, Martha's predecessor, and Jack, who was working late in the gardens, both gave statements confirming my account. But Michael, he always insinuated that I had somehow orchestrated it. He was close to Rebecca, used to feed into her paranoia sometimes. I think he truly believes I'm responsible. Emily absorbed this information, her mind racing. So it's your word against his suspicions. But after 6 years, why would the police take this seriously now? The answer came the next day, when Detective Wilson returned, this time with a forensic team. They headed straight for the balcony off Rebecca's room. We've received information, Wilson explained coldly, suggesting that the railing didn't simply give way, that it may have been deliberately weakened beforehand. Emily watched in horror as the team removed sections of the railing, bagging them as evidence. Nathan stood, like a statue, disbelief etched across his features. This is insane, he murmured. Completely insane. That night, after Nathan had finally fallen into a restless sleep, Emily sat in the library surrounded by books but unable to focus on any of them. Her mind kept returning to the police, to Michael, to the web of suspicion being woven around the man she loved. A soft knock at the door startled her. Jack stood there, his weathered face grave. Miss Emily, I need to speak with you, privately. She followed him out to the gardens where the night air was cool and the moon cast long shadows across the manicured lawns. I know what Mr. Michael is doing, Jack said without preamble. And I know he's lying. Hope flared in Emily's chest. You were here that night. You saw what happened. Jack nodded, his eyes fixed on some distant point. I was pruning the roses below that very balcony. I heard them arguing, heard her threats. I saw her back away when Mr. Nathan approached, saw the railing give way. He turned to Emily, his expression earnest. And I saw something else too. Something I didn't tell the police back then, because I was afraid. What did you? See, Jack? Earlier that day I saw Mr. Michael up on that balcony. He was examining the railing, running his hands along it. I thought nothing of it at the time. But later, after what happened, I wondered. Emily's blood ran cold. Are you saying that Michael might have tampered with the railing, that he set this up? I'm saying it's possible, miss. Mr. Michael always had an unhealthy interest in Mr. Nathan's fortune. And he was particularly attentive to Miss Rebecca in those last weeks. This new information cast everything in a different light. If Michael had indeed weakened the railing, knowing Rebecca's unstable condition, knowing she often went out on that balcony during episodes. Jack, would you be willing to tell this to the police? The old gardener hesitated, fear flickering across his face. Mr. Michael has connections, miss. Powerful friends. He could make life very difficult for an old man like me. He's already making life impossible for Nathan, Emily countered. And if what you're suggesting is true, then he got away with something terrible 6 years ago. Please, Jack, we need your help. After a long moment, Jack nodded. I'll speak to the police, but there's something else you should know. Miss Rebecca kept a second diary, one she hid from Mr. Nathan. She gave it to me for safekeeping just days before she died. Said if anything happened to her, I should keep it hidden unless absolutely necessary. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, leather-bound book. I think now qualifies as necessary. Emily took the diary with trembling hands. Why would she give this to you? She trusted me. I'd worked for her family before she married Mr. Nathan. She knew I would honor her wishes. Jack's eyes misted with memory. She was a troubled soul, but she had a good heart. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Back in the library, Emily read Rebecca's secret diary by lamplight. The entries were chaotic, reflecting her mental state, but certain passages stood out with chilling clarity. Michael came to see me today. He says Nathan has been meeting with lawyers about having me committed, says he's worried about me, wants to help protect me. I don't know who to trust anymore. And later, Michael brought me pills today, said they would help keep my mind clear, help me see the truth, different from my prescription. I'm scared to take them, but I'm more scared not to. What if Nathan really is planning to lock me away? What if Michael is right? The final entry, dated the very day of her death, made Emily gasp aloud. Something is wrong with the pills Michael gave me. The voices are louder than ever. They're telling me terrible things. Nathan came home early looking worried. He says I seem unwell. Is he noticing the effects of whatever Michael has been giving me? I'm going to confront Michael tonight. He's coming over while Nathan is at his evening meeting. I need to know the truth. Emily closed the diary, her mind racing. If Rebecca had confronted Michael, if he had realized she was onto him, it would explain why he might have tampered with the railing, a desperate act to silence her before she could expose him. The next morning, Emily called Detective Wilson, requesting an urgent meeting. The detective arrived looking skeptical, but her expression changed as Emily presented Jack's testimony and Rebecca's hidden diary. This is significant new information, Wilson admitted, turning the diary's pages carefully. But it doesn't prove Mr. Blackwood's innocence. It only casts suspicion on another party. It establishes reasonable doubt, Emily countered, and it gives you cause to investigate Michael Blackwood with the same thoroughness you've been investigating Nathan. Wilson studied Emily for a long moment. You care deeply for him, don't you? I love him, Emily said simply, and I believe in his innocence. Love can be blinding, Miss Roberts. So can ambition, Detective. And Michael Blackwood stands to inherit millions if Nathan is convicted. The investigation took a dramatic turn after that. Michael was brought in for questioning, his alibi for the night of Rebecca's death scrutinized. The pills mentioned in Rebecca's diary became a focus of interest, with police seeking medical records to determine if any unauthorized medications had been in her system. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Martha, the current housekeeper, had worked for a pharmaceutical company before coming to the mansion. Quietly, without telling anyone, she had kept samples of the mysterious pills that Rebecca wrote about, pills she had found and hidden away after becoming housekeeper, suspecting they might be important someday. I always thought there was something wrong about how that poor woman died, Martha explained when she finally came forward. And when I found these pills hidden in her vanity drawer years ago, I kept them, just in case. The pills, when analyzed, proved to be a potent combination of hallucinogens and mood destabilizers, a dangerous cocktail for anyone, but potentially fatal for someone with Rebecca's condition. The case against Nathan crumbled, while the evidence against Michael mounted. The investigation revealed financial troubles Michael had been hiding, massive debts that would have been resolved by inheriting his uncle's fortune. Text messages were recovered, showing he had been in contact with Rebecca in the days leading to her death, messages that aligned with her diary entries. Through it all, Nathan's health continued to deteriorate. The stress of the investigation, combined with his existing heart condition, led to a major cardiac event that left him hospitalized in critical condition. Emily never left his side, sleeping in a chair beside his hospital bed, monitoring his vitals with the same dedication she had shown at the mansion. It was there, in the sterile hospital room, that Nathan woke one morning to find Emily slumped over in exhaustion. her hand still holding his. "You're still here," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with wonder. Emily stirred, her eyes finding his. "Always," she promised. "Always." The doctors weren't optimistic about Nathan's prognosis. The damage to his heart was extensive, compounded by years of stress and inadequate treatment. They recommended an experimental procedure, risky but potentially life-saving. "It's a chance," Dr. Reynolds explained, his expression grave. "But without it, I give him 6 months at most." Emily took the decision without hesitation. "Schedule the surgery. We'll take that chance." The day before the operation, Michael was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including evidence tampering and involuntary manslaughter in Rebecca's death. The news brought a measure of peace to Nathan, but the shadow of the upcoming surgery loomed large. "If I don't survive tomorrow," he said to Emily the night before, "know that you've given me more happiness in these few months than I've known in years. You made me believe in second chances." Emily kissed him gently, mindful of the monitors and tubes. "Save your strength for recovery. We have plans to make, remember? Medical school for me, a future for us." Nathan smiled weakly. "Tell me about our future. Help me see it." And so through the night, Emily painted pictures with words, of her studies, of renovations to the mansion, of holidays they would celebrate together, of a life rebuilt from the ashes of tragedy. With each vision of tomorrow, Nathan seemed to grow stronger, more determined to fight for the chance to make these dreams reality. The 6 hours that Nathan spent in surgery were the longest of Emily's life. She remained in the waiting room like a sentinel, refusing to eat, drink, or move away even for a minute. Michael tried to appear a few times, but was firmly barred by Emily, who discovered a strength within herself that she didn't know existed. "He's not welcome here," she told the nurses, "not while I'm responsible for medical decisions." Outside, the media circus continued, but Emily had stopped caring. Her mother finally managed to reach the hospital, bringing with her a surprise: Jack, the gardener from the mansion. "Miss Emily," said Jack timidly, "I need to tell you something important." What Jack revealed changed everything. For years he had been silenced by Michael, who blackmailed him with threats against his family. But seeing what was happening with Emily and Nathan, he decided to break his silence. "Mr. Michael has recordings," said Jack. "Recordings of phone conversations that he made himself, edited to make it seem like Mr. Nathan was planning something against his first wife. And there are fake documents too, which he intended to use if needed." "Recordings of what?" asked Emily. "Conversations where Mr. Nathan was talking to doctors about how to hospitalize Mrs. Rebecca when she was having episodes. Michael cut out the parts where they talked about helping her, leaving only the parts where it seemed like Mr. Nathan wanted to get rid of her." Emily felt her blood boil. "Do you have proof of this?" Jack nodded, taking a flash drive from his pocket. "I recorded everything secretly, his conversations, preparing the traps, the instructions he gave to corrupt employees, everything." It was the weapon Emily needed. While Nathan fought for his life on the operating table, Emily orchestrated the counter-offensive. She called all the media outlets that had published stories about her, offering exclusive evidence of a much bigger scandal, an ambitious nephew's attempt to frame his own uncle to get his inheritance. The effect was immediate and devastating for Michael. Within hours, the narrative completely changed. The same stations that had treated him as a hero now exposed him as an unscrupulous manipulator. Jack's recordings were broadcast nationally, showing Michael fabricating lies, forging documents, and confessing his plans to eliminate any obstacle to the inheritance. Greg, seeing the tide turn, tried to distance himself from the scandal, but Emily wouldn't allow it. In her first televised interview, she exposed him too, telling about his obsessive and possessive behavior, about how he had tried to take advantage of the situation to force her to return to him. "There are men who love," Emily said to the cameras, "and there are men who want to possess. The difference lies in respecting a woman's choice." When Nathan finally came out of surgery, 12 hours later than expected due to complications, Emily was by his side. The surgeon, Dr. Parker, smiled, tired but relieved. It was more difficult than we expected, but we succeeded. His heart is functioning. He'll need months of recovery, but the outlook is optimistic. Nathan opened his eyes slowly, focusing on Emily's face, leaning over him. You stayed. I promised I would, Emily whispered, kissing his forehead. And I have a surprise for you. She told him about Michael's downfall, about how Jack had revealed himself as an unexpected ally, about how the truth had finally come to light. Nathan listened to everything with a mixture of amazement and pride. You did all this by yourself? I did it for the man I love, and because I learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's yours. Nathan's recovery was slow but steady. During the weeks that followed, Emily divided her time between the hospital and the mansion, which was now besieged by journalists wanting to tell the true love story. But this time the coverage was sympathetic. The young nurse who saved a widowed millionaire's heart, both literally and figuratively. Michael faced multiple criminal charges and was completely disinherited. Greg simply disappeared from town, unable to face the public humiliation. And Mrs. Margaret, seeing her daughter's genuine happiness, finally gave her blessing to the relationship. The wedding took place 3 months later, in an intimate ceremony in the mansion's gardens. Emily wore a simple but elegant dress that she had bought with her own money. She insisted on that. Nathan, still recovering but radiant, waited for her under a pergola of white roses. "Do you take this man?" said the minister, "in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health?" "I do," replied Emily, looking into the eyes of the man who had transformed her life, forever. When they kissed as husband and wife, Emily thought of the shy girl who had left Pine Ridge months before. That girl was afraid to dream big, believed that love was destiny and not choice. This woman knew that love was a daily struggle, the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to protect what matters. The mansion was transformed, as Nathan had promised. Rebecca's room became an office where Emily studied for her medical school. Exams. She had received a full scholarship to a nearby university. The library gained an even larger medical section, and the garden, a gazebo where they had coffee every morning. But the most significant change was invisible. The house no longer harbored ghosts. It harbored dreams, plans, the promise of a future built step by two people who had learned that true love not only overcomes external obstacles, but transforms those who love. On a winter night, almost a year after the wedding, Emily was reading in the library when Nathan approached from behind, enveloping her in his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Emily leaned back against his chest, feeling the strong and regular beats of the heart they had almost lost. "I'm thinking that we are proof that some happy endings are worth every tear shed to achieve them." Nathan kissed the top of E. Her head, and both looked out the window at the mountains that had united them. Outside it was beginning to snow, covering the world with the silent promise of new beginnings.